Hi, everyone. Whoops. Hello, everyone. I think we're going to get started now. It is 6 o'clock, and we want to be starting right on time tonight. So welcome to the City of Montrose City Council Candidates Forum, organized and hosted by the League of Women Voters of Montrose County. My name's Tanya Ishikawa, and I'll be your moderator tonight. The goal of the forum is to present the views of the candidates seeking city council seats in a fair, nonpartisan setting so that you, the voter, can make an informed voting decision. Thanks so much for so many people coming out tonight. I know there's lots of forums happening for this election, and so it's great to see you here. Let's see, tonight's event is being aired on the radio station KUBC, and it's also live streamed on the city's TV channel 191, and then it will be rebroadcast on the city's channel every evening at 8 o'clock up until the election. Also, tomorrow morning, if any of your friends or relatives couldn't make it tonight, there is the Heidi's Forum that's at 8 o'clock. Where is that located this time? Where? Cascade Hall at CMU, right? The university and the library there. And that'll be at 8 in the morning till 9. And that is also going to be broadcast on the city's channel. And that'll be every afternoon at 4 p.m. until the election. So you can look there as well. Please, everybody, turn off your cell phones or turn them to vibrate so that we can have no disturbances during the evening. Candidates as well, please. Let's see. The views expressed here this evening will be those of the candidates, not of the host organization. So please be aware that the League of Women Voters neither supports nor opposes any of these candidates. The explanation of the office and election information. This year there's 11 candidates running for 3 open seats on the Montrose City Council. This election will be mail-in ballot only, and ballots will be mailed the week of March 16th, so next week. The date of the election is April 7th, so all ballots must be received by 7 p.m. on that evening in order to be counted. And I'm sure the city website has information on how you can get those and which locations you can deliver those to. The ground rules for tonight's forum have been distributed to the candidates already. Tonight's format will be opening statements at 1.5 minutes each, and we'll go in the order of the candidates that, well, I was supposed to go with the order on the ballot, and I'm hoping that's the way that you are. That's good, because on my list here it was different. So but anyway, we'll go in that order that you are up on the dais. Next, we'll have one question from the League of Women Voters that none of you have seen yet. And for that answer, please do a 1-minute answer. And then we'll start with audience questions. And those answers will also be 1 minute each. And the audience questions, we would hope that right now, or already by now, that you have handed them to the League of Women Voters members at the back of the room, because there are so many candidates tonight and so many questions already gathered that I fear that we won't get to the extra questions at the end if you haven't given them. So if you haven't yet, feel free. Jan's still in the back of the room, and she can get one from you. If you think of one during the event, that's probably safe as well to give one to her just in case. Otherwise, the questions that we've received so far, they're putting them in order and making sure that duplicates aren't there. And some of you, I'll be reading it for you. And others that want to give the question yourselves have already chosen that, and I'll have a microphone sent out to you. And then to end, we'll do a final 1.5 minute closing statement from each of the candidates. And you'll see how I order it. We start the very first beginning statement with you, but then we go with the next person for the next question, and the next person for the next question. And then when we do the closing statements, we actually go back that direction. So we start here and go that way. So now we can begin with the beginning and opening statements. And let's see. We're going to, instead of going down the line and saying everybody's names first, we'll do the names as we do the opening statements. So if the first candidate, which the first 2 candidates up there are for the District 3 for a 4-year term, and we'll start with Roy Anderson. 1.5 minutes, please. And this is our timer, our volunteer timer, Rod, and please do pay attention to his cards.
Okay, thanks. I am Roy Anderson, and I'm running for re-election to City Council, as she said, for District 3. Thanks to the League, and thank all of you for coming tonight. It's been my honor to serve the people of Montrose on City Council for the last 4 years, and as your mayor in 2018. I have a vision for Montrose that I think many of you might share. A woman is pushing a baby stroller as she jogs along the river trail, passing under Townsend, unbothered by the traffic that's above her. She and her husband have good-paying jobs in Montrose, rent a nice apartment they can comfortably afford, and enjoy a convenient child care facility. Lots of citizens have shared this vision with me, both young people and those in my generation. We all want a vibrant, healthy community where we can work and play. A local gentleman here once told me, Roy, we either grow or we wither and die. We've accomplished so much in the last 4 years thanks to citizens' input from the comprehensive plan, the focus groups that were associated with that, and our citizen survey in 2016. So these have been prioritized, and the budget is formed as a result to meet the needs of our citizens. So partnerships with local organizations have led to a responsive and I think an effective local government. So I would appreciate your vote and look forward to serving you 4 more years. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Anderson. And now also running for District 3, David White.
Good evening. My name is David White. I'm a longtime resident in Montrose. My wife and I have had 4 businesses here that we have started. I consider myself to be an entrepreneur. We've raised 6 children here in Montrose, graduates of Montrose High School, almost all of them. And it is my pleasure to be here tonight, and I thank you all for attending. I have had some experience in the serving the community over the years. I was on City Council back in 2004, and we were in a period of time not too dissimilar from what we've been in these last few years, a period of growth, a period of economic vitality, and unfortunately that ended in 2008, and this community has struggled. And we've now come back from that, and I want to make sure that we sustain that environment of success. But I think we need to focus on the public's health, safety, and welfare. We've got a lot of nice-to-haves that have taken place, but now we need to get back to the core principles. We're in some interesting times, as you all know. But I look forward to tonight's discussion, and what you have to think about all of us will be made known at the ballot box, and I too would appreciate your support after this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now for District 4, we have 4 people running for a 4-year term. And please begin, Mr. Stockton.
Good evening, my name is Dave Stockton, and I'm running for the District 4 City Council vacancy. I'm going to share with you what I shared at the Pizza and Politics the other night, but I think it's an important message. But a month or so ago, I had a conversation with a woman named Colleen, and she asked me, why on earth would anybody want to run for city council? And I shared that answer with her, and I'll share it with you later on. But my main message is that I've been attending city council meetings for a couple of years now, because I knew to be an effective counselor, I had to learn what goes on. So I've been to all the meetings except 2 or 3. I've been to over half the work sessions, and over the last 2 years, I've learned to appreciate what they do here in council and our city administration. I've come to know all the department heads, and I've got a good feel for their operations. So I think with my experience of getting involved over the last 2 years, I'm your candidate of choice, and I'm ready to serve you on day 1. Thank you.
Thank you. And now the next candidate, Mary Brunecki.
I'm Mary Brunecki. Can you hear me? No. Oh,
I got to push the button.
I'm Mary Brunecki. I am running for District 4. Many of you have known the Brunecki family in this town forever. We have a lot of roots here. I am running for city council because there was so much discontent in this community that I decided to be part of the solution and not continue on with the problems. I see Montrose as a vital source that can continue to grow, but at the same time grow in the way that the citizens want it and not on someone's agenda. What I can bring is I have 20 years of nursing experience, over 20, and in that time I've become a patient advocate, and I would bring that advocacy to each and every one of you, no matter what walks of life you may come from. I have to push a time clock, the same as many of you here. I don't have the opportunity to own a business or be self-reliant and rich. I have to work the same as everyone else. I have to pay the taxes as everyone else. And what happens within the city affects each and every one of us. And I want to be your voice, so I certainly hope that you can all think of me and vote for me for City Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our next District 4 candidate, William Bennett, please.
Good evening. My name is Bill Bennett, and I am one of two boys. I paid for my college graduation, majored in business and history. I have 21 years in the Marine Corps, and I was married to my wife at the age of 22, and we're still that way. Owned 9 homes, lived in 5 states and 2 foreign countries, and after a tour as a logistics officer for a regiment, I retired. I have owned and operated 4 businesses since that time, one of which I still have. I've worked for several positions in private industry, naval aviation, real estate, sales, rental management, and 5 years as a fulfillment center for our daughter's business here in Montrose. I was a trustee and director at Montrose Memorial Hospital for 5 years, a $118 million business with 550 employees in 2014. I'm a Mason, a Shriner. I am a member of the American Legion, VFW, DAV, and I was post-certified as a law enforcement officer in Idaho. For 21 years, I owned a small ranch south of town. I just got rid of it. We've lived in Montrose City for 11 years. My postgraduate education is in accounting and law at the University of Virginia. I would love to be your representative on council. I know that I have some ideas that will put this city in good shape for the future, and I would like to see them implemented. Please give me your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our final candidate for District 4, Dave Frank.
Good evening, I'm Dave Frank. I'm running for the District 4 seat. I'm a native of Montrose, grew up here, graduated from high school here, chose to make my home here forever. I've been in the same house for 29 years. Got my family and grandchildren are here. I've been active in our community for the last 20 years. I've been involved in committees and various programs that allow me to have a real deep understanding of not only the needs of Montrose, but the history behind them. I know what things we need to look at, but I also know what things failed in the past and what things succeeded in the past. So with that depth of knowledge and understanding, I think I would make an excellent representative for you on the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we have our at-large candidates, and this at-large seat is a 2-year term. And so, and it looks like we have all candidates here now. Great. So our first candidate will be Charlie Oswald. Please introduce yourself and your beginning statement.
Hi, I'm Charlie Oswald, and when I learned about Montrose many years ago, I actually made it a goal to get here. My family, I followed family, and it was clear that they were having way too much fun without me. But after I moved here, I worked to become involved, and I actually graduated from the Montrose U Leadership Program. And from that and my involvement, I learned that we are unique in so many ways. We have a large, lower-income service industry that can't find homes. We need to attract investment but the numbers cannot compete in a good economy. We have designated opportunity zones because a large portion of the people live at or below the poverty level. And yet we can market to up to 100,000 people that pass through this community and use our airport. But it's clear that there is a disconnect between the city and the government. Between the city and the community. Many say and have told me that they feel left out and unrepresented. And I think that's true when you look at how the priorities are listed in the budget. Promoting Montrose as a destination for outdoor recreation is actually listed above improving aging infrastructure. We have to shift priorities and improve confidence. And I honestly feel that won't happen if we're attempting to move to an administrative government like Boulder and Denver. People talked about how things used to be, about the organizations that brought people downtown, and yes, they've mentioned that there were problems.
Ms. Oswald, we've hit your time, so.
Oh, okay. But they want to be included. I've been a single mother, managed numerous employees, and been self-employed. I enjoy working with people and can relate to most because of my background and experience, and I would like to be the next city council member. Thank you.
And now, Ms. Barbara Bynum.
Hi, good evening. My name is Barbara Bynum. Thank you so much to the League of Women Voters for having us, and thank you to everyone who came out tonight to learn more about their city council candidates. Over 11 years ago, I was attending a meeting, and I don't remember what the meeting was for, but I can picture it was upstairs in a building, and at that point, I was president of the parent-teacher organization, and I had a first grader and a fifth grader in elementary school here in Montrose. And I was asked by a woman I really respect if I wouldn't consider applying for the opening on the school board. I did and was appointed to the school board and was subsequently reelected, and thus became a 10-year history of me serving this community in various elected offices. At my heart, I'm a planner. I'm someone who thinks strategically, who researches various options and gathers opinions. I listen to people, and I believe that every voice is important in creating a vision for Montrose. You may know me from my work on the Montrose Community Recreation Center, where I collaborated with others to create value for our community by building an amazing rec center. It's that kind of financial accountability and strategic thinking that I bring to my role as a city councilor. I listen to the people of Montrose, and I do the hard work necessary to deliver the results for our community. I would appreciate your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now we have Yvonne Meek.
Hi, I'm Yvonne Meek. I've been a resident of Montrose since 1996. My family owned property across the canyon in Crawford, actually Mayor, which was Montrose County, for over 100 years. So we're definitely understand the structures of living in the county. I am the taxpayer's advocate. We are tired of paying taxes on our food. We are tired, the county residents are tired of paying taxes on projects that they don't have any jurisdiction over or that they would have to pay additional funds to use, and that would be a rec district and many other things. I own a business downtown on Main Street. I've been involved in Main Motion and the DDA. The DDA is gone, and I want to know why. I don't think that what's happening in our city is right, and I'm going to speak out against it. There's a lot of backroom deals and, you know, let our friends get what they want, and we ignore the taxpayers. This is hurting the taxpayers. I know many families that are struggling, that are young families that are struggling to pay their bills and to find housing, and they're taxpayers. And it's difficult for them, and there has to be a better way than our city continuing to spend money recklessly. I'm Yvonne Meek. I want your vote, and I hope you will vote for me, and I'm going to stand for the taxpayers in this town.
Thank you. And our next at-large candidate, Paul Arbogast.
Hello, everyone. I'm Paul Arbogast. I've lived in Montrose for 16 years. Prior to coming to Montrose, really was military all over the USA. When I got out, I had several job offers. One of them was here, and I came and checked out everywhere there was. and I fell in love with this place. I have no intention to ever leave in 16 years until I die. I'm going to be here. I own 2 small businesses in town, Intrinsic, the music venue, and my own photography studio that I just built and opened up. So the economy of Montrose is very, very important to me. I think in general, the city council has been full of people that aren't business owners or current business owners, so they don't know what's going on in town. I know a lot of people have said there's a lot of disconnect between the government and the people. I hear that all the time too. Not enough listening, not enough getting out the data or getting it out in a proper way, and I want to fix that. I want to hear what everybody thinks. I want to hear what everybody wants to know. It's not to be here for yourself. It's to be here for the people of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Ulibarri, it's a 1.5 minute opening statement, and our timer is here, so in case you see a red sign.
Okay, my name is Ed Ulibarri. This is just an introduction. I've been on the city council before. I've been on the school board before. I've served with the MATA board. I've served on the board of directors for Habitat for Humanity. I was on the DMEA Consumer Advisor Board. I went to the Police Academy here in Montrose. I did the Uncompahgre Valley Leadership Training. I went to the Leadership of the Rockies, and I also went to Non-Commissioned Officer School. And so if it says anything about my character and my ability to get things done, which I hope it does, I would like for your support and elect me as your new council person. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're just going over the questions from the audience. So now we'll begin the lead question, and we'll continue this discussion while you're answering. So sorry for a little whispering over here. But the lead question, now with this question and all the rest of the questions, it'll be a 1-minute answer each person. And I guess since we did the opening statements starting with Mr. Anderson, we'll start the first question with Mr. White. And the lead question that we came up for this evening is, this election has brought out an unusually large number of candidates, all who are passionate about city government funds and how they should be spent or not spent. In your 1 minute that you have been given, can you please tell us where you would direct city funds if elected, and possibly what programs or activities that you would want to have less funding or to be defunded?
Okay, thank you. The question that I'm asking is, where have your taxpayer dollars gone? We see $10 million in bonds that were floated for the Colorado Outdoors project. Some of that went to accelerate street programs. There were $42 million in arrears due to deferred maintenance. We've neglected our infrastructure. Speculative investment in hotels. The Fairfield Inn is looking at, between the Urban Renewal Authority, which the City Council sits as the board of directors of that entity, as well as the City Council itself, $816,000, an apartment complex, not affordable housing, but just a market rate housing complex. You're looking at a few $1 million going in to support the infrastructure, as well as horizontal improvements, new buzzword for parking lots, lights, landscaping. We look at other quote-unquote investment in retail businesses to compete against private business. These are the kind of things that I personally defund. We're not going to do that until we put the public health, safety, welfare first.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Stockton.
It's an interesting question, and I hope I have an interesting answer. I don't agree with Mr. White. I believe that we need to continue to fund the Urban Renewal Authority. It's not something new. It's not something unique to Montrose. Colorado Springs has 2 of them. Durango is looking at creating an Urban Renewal Authority based on what we're doing here in Montrose. Their council is going to look at that this coming Tuesday, I believe. We've realized, I think, $11 million in return in private investment already from the Urban Renewal Authority, and we're looking at $33 million in the future. I'm confident that that's going to be a success. In terms of what we don't want to fund, I think we could do away with incentives for employment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. The basis of the question is, if you were elected, where specifically would you want to direct city funds? And are there any programs or activities that the city does now that you'd want to fund less or not at all?
What I would like to see is the money come back to the community. Instead of downsizing the city parks department, the city streets, I mean, look at the condition that they're in right now. I would put that money back into the city there, whether it be get the employees back that they got rid of or fix it. Just coming here, I took a wrong turn and had to go down, I believe it was 3rd Street. And the road condition just between here and there was horrible. So I would like to see the money get back, put back into the city where it belongs, with the community, and not out at different ends of town, but work on our infrastructure that's in town.
Thank you. And Mr. Bennett?
I personally am not fond of doing what others do because they've done it. My mother used to say to me, "How come you did that, Billy?" And I'd say, "Well, Johnny did it." She said, "Would you jump off the Brooklyn Bridge if Johnny did it?" I said, "No, Mom." "Then why are you doing it?" And the same question is to be asked about why we should have a sales tax at 8.5% or whatever it is, just because it's in the middle of the crowd. Why do we have to have any? Maybe we don't. And I would like to explore the differences between 0 and 8.5. There must be some way of doing it, and I am sure that it can be done. As far as the grocery sales tax goes, it's the job of the council to figure out an alternative way, because almost 50% of the people said they didn't want that tax, and 7 people on this dais said they didn't want it the other night. So I'd like to see that go away.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Frank.
One thing I'd like to see a little bit more money go to is that this afternoon I had the opportunity to talk to some of the people from the Hispanic Affairs Project, Tortilla Flats, and to me it's an absolute crying shame that they don't have sidewalks and crosswalks for the children in that area. I would see us, and I know the city has had a lot of money going into infrastructure projects in the last couple of years, and they're refocusing now, and I would like to make sure that our area of focus remains on those infrastructure improvements. We have sewer lines that are 45 to 60 years old. We need to make sure that we're updating and maintaining the infrastructure we have for the citizenry we already have. I don't have any pet project that I would unfund, but I would like to see our focus a little more sharply defined on improving the quality of life of all of our citizens.
Thank you. And Ms. Oswald?
I too would put a lot more funding into infrastructure. When you drive around, you see places where there still isn't even paving, and the potholes and the lack of sidewalks, I think, is something that we need to focus on. Another thing that I would focus on is a way to provide equity-based housing. We do need apartments, but they don't promote stability in the community. We need to find ways to work with builders, with the city, and with nonprofits to find a way to build homes for the people that are in the lower income range. I don't have anything either at this point that I would unfund, but those were the things I'd focus on. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bynum.
Hi, thank you for the question. You know, I think it's important to understand from a counselor's perspective, it isn't about what I want to see funded, it's about listening to what the people of Montrose want to see funded. And for that, we go back to the comprehensive plan and the 2016 survey that were done in our community, where we heard overwhelmingly that people want to see us continue to invest in infrastructure. That means maintaining and expanding our roads. They want to see increased public safety, which I think we've done a good job of addressing, and they want to see more and better paying jobs. And so I think that doing the incentives to bring new businesses here that are creating high-paying jobs is important work of council. But I also know that people are attracted to this community because of our way of life, and that includes our trails and our wonderful outdoors. So I want to continue to make Montrose a place that people want to live, work, and retire. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Meek?
I would directly unfund the Colorado Outdoors Project. We're $8 to $10 million in investments so far. It's tax funded, it's taxpayer funded. It should eventually, hopefully, will pay for itself, we've been told. But the reality is, we did a police safety sales tax, and that won only by, I think it was 69 votes, and we've added that tax to the citizens, and yet we can manage to put money into Colorado Outdoors. That's a pretty creative project. How come we couldn't find money creatively to put into the police safety situation? So that's something that I would definitely look into unfunding. That's your taxpayer dollars going to a luxury development with homes that most of the average citizens will be able to afford. You talk about apartments as affordable housing. I don't want to live in an apartment. How many people want to live in an apartment? Let's call it workforce apartments. Do you really all want to live in apartments? Yeah, you do it for 6 months, you do it for a few years, but for the most part, you don't want to do that.
Thank you. And the next, Mr. Arbogast?
I agree with what a lot of people said. Focus needs to be on infrastructure. A lot of it's been ignored for a long time. We have neighborhoods who, I went out today too and walked through the neighborhood, who've been ignored for far too long. Focus has been in other parts of the city. The city should focus evenly across the city for all people and all citizens. One thing that struck me is I went to one of the 2040 work meetings, whatever they call it, the future planning, and a big thing that I heard from people was beautification. They wanted pots planted and flowers planted and all that stuff, and my comment was, have you walked the first 3 blocks of Main Street or been down towards Oxbow Shopping Center and seen how many empty slots we have for business? We need to work on local business, putting our money there and getting that built and solid.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Ulibarri. Oh, not finally, we have one more after you. Sorry.
I agree with pretty much everybody here about everything they want to do, but the bottom line is, in my opinion, is we're taxed and we have a large debt. We have the $16 million police department, we have a rec department, we have a golf course, we have a pavilion. There's a lot of other things in this community that we're paying for and we'll keep on paying for a long time. I think we need to look at what our debt ratio is and perhaps maybe try and consolidate that and get it back to normal so that if we wanted to cut the tax down on groceries or whatever, we could afford to do it. I talked to somebody in Delta recently about why they don't have a sales tax on food, and the first thing that came out of his mouth was, we're not as heavy indebted as the city of Montrose. We have little or no debt at all. Thank you.
Thank you. And now our final answer to that question, Mr. Anderson.
Thanks. Well, clearly I think that our funding needs to be based on citizen input, and we have heard about our infrastructure and the need for economic development to continue, and of course public safety. And so I support those things, and I applaud Mr. Frank's comment about Tortilla Flats. I actually walked 4th Street and crossed, as many kids do, to get over the elementary school, and it needs a lot of attention. And so I would direct some funding there. What would I defund? Well, just like at home, you know, a budget is a balancing act, and there's a lot of needs, and we get pulled in many directions. So I would rather spread out our capital budget to pay for certain things over a number of years. And I think that's an alternative to actually defunding something. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we will go to our audience questions. And I'm going to try and keep these in the order that they were given to us. But yes, so for the ones that are written, I will read them. For the ones that are oral, I will ask the people in the audience who wanted to say them to say them. And for a couple of the questions, the League of Women Voters has reserved the right to try and make them more appropriate for all candidates rather than, say, impacting just one candidate. So, so if you're in the audience and you've left a question with us, if you see a change in the question, that is the reason why, and you can take it up with us afterwards, but we need to moderate this event somewhat. The other thing is, if for some reason somebody's question doesn't get answered tonight, we're planning to give them that question to the candidates, and we were hoping to get their answers where we could put them up on the League of Women Voters website for you. And so we'll be working that out within the next few days if that ends up happening. So we'll be asking the candidates to cooperate with that as well, since it won't be during this, if you have extra time in the next couple days to answer any of the questions. So these answers will also be 1 minute, and the written ones I read, so they'll definitely be under 30 seconds. The oral ones, when the audience stands up, instead of having too long of an explanation of why you're asking a question, if you could keep your whole question and comment within 30 seconds as well. So our first question to the candidates I will read, and we'll start with Mr. Stockton for this one. And it is, how would you approach gender diversity and equity were you elected?
Well, I didn't know there was really a problem with gender diversity. I'm not in the workplace anymore, so I'm really not exposed to any disparaging things that may happen there. But I know one thing that I would do, and I would ensure that there would be no statutes passed that would allow any biases to go against any one gender or any racial background or anything of that sort. You know, I just don't accept that type of attitude. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Brennicke.
Well, most of you who know me as a nurse, I don't pick and choose who my patients are. It doesn't matter what color, what nationality, what gender you may identify with. I am here to take care of you. And I've told many patients, don't worry, I'm here. And as someone who is really sick, that I've had patients tell me that that was great comfort to them. As far as making sure that it was occurring in the city, I find it a little bit appalling that there would be this kind of bias in this community as it is. I don't think that there's any room for it in any way, shape, or form, and there are governmental laws that protect you. And so if you are having problems, let us know. There are ways around it, and we can help you with that.
Thank you for your answer. Mr. Bennett.
I served at an outfit for 21 years where in 1947, President Truman told them there would be no difference between black people and white people in the Marine Corps. The Commandant said there would be none, and there was none. Now, of course, there always is something undercurrent. I watched a guy get thrown out of OCS because he said he wouldn't take orders from a black man. And I don't buy any of that stuff. I disagree with the way some people on this in this town think of our friends over in Tortilla Flats, and also our friends south of Main Street here in the lower echelons of town. Those things are all the wrong way of thinking. They're all us. And I spent a lot of time in the Marine Corps with people that lived, got wounded, and died that were of the lesser, what would you say, elite of the country. And they bleed just like I did.
Thank you.
No room for it.
Mr. Frank, how would you approach gender diversity and equity if you were elected?
There are so many great training programs that are specifically designed toward increasing awareness of diversity and equity that are available. And I believe the city already involves the staff in some of those trainings. And I'm not sure if it is mandatory or not at this point, but it certainly should be.
Thank you. Ms. Oswald?
Would you repeat the question, please?
Sure.
I'm having a hard time hearing.
If you were elected, how would you approach gender diversity and equity in your role?
I think we're all created equal. I wouldn't tolerate any kind of a bias. I think that I strongly believe that we're all created equal, and if people need counseling to understand that, well, then I would support that.
Thank you. Ms. Bynum?
For starters, let's make sure to elect women to city council because representation matters. You know, one of the largest employers in our community is government, and I'm really proud to report back to you that the city and the county do joint employee training these days. It's a one sign of the way that the city and the county are really getting along and working together, saving you guys money, which is important. And those full-day employee trainings do cover things like inclusion and diversity training. So I'm proud of the work that we're doing. I think we're an example for the community. We have many women in senior leadership roles within the city government. And also, I think when you look at our police force, I'm so proud to see so many women serving in our local police force and being promoted to sergeant. So I think we're doing a good job at the city, and I continue to want to be part of that.
Thank you. Ms. Meek?
We are all God's children and all created in His image and equally. It is not right that anyone should feel that they're less than that. And I don't think that we need to legislate more because there's already legislation, federal and local, that allows us to understand that we are equal. So,
Thank you. And Mr. Arbogast?
Yeah. The only solution, I would think, if there is a problem that exists, I'm sure there are pockets of it here and there, is education. Education of our kids from the start. They're born without bias. They're taught that stuff. They need to have that wiped from their heads. Personally, I look at somebody's heart and their head, and that's all that matters, and that's how it should be. And everybody would realize how much more they have in common than different after that.
Thank you. Mr. Ulibarri?
I have one question, and it was your question. Would you please read just the first part of it?
Sure. If you were elected, how would you approach gender diversity and equity?
Gender?
Yes, gender.
Oh, okay, well, I was just curious as to how that fit into the financial aspect, because I wrote down financial.
It could.
A little hard of hearing. Well, first of all, if the way I feel about it is it doesn't make any difference what gender you are, whether you're or your ethnicity. If you can do the job, you should get the job.
Thank you. And Mr. Anderson?
Okay, I think that any form of discrimination is not only against our nation's laws and our state laws and even against God's law. So gender diversity is something that I think is very important for the community, for city council. And as a couple of people said, we do have a lot of training classes that are mandatory for city staff. And so I know for certain that any form of discrimination, be it gender or anything else, is not tolerated and shouldn't be. So I think it goes without saying.
Thank you. And Mr. White?
Well, I'll just echo the comments of everybody here. You know, we live in a world today that we've come to learn to accept diversity, male, female. You know, it's regardless of your sexual orientation, the laws are there to protect everyone, and everybody has equal rights under national law, state law, local law, God's law. And so, you know, you are a person every one of us are unique. We've come from different places, have different experiences. I can't judge you, nor should government judge you. And so, again, echoing what everybody else has said, gender diversity and equity is something that's built in today, and we need to honor that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we're to our next question, aren't we? I'm starting to lose track. Now I've got a list going, so I'm going to make sure. So our next question is an oral question from Mr. Frank, Zach Frank. So we have a microphone, and for the purposes of TV and radio, if you could talk into that mic, it's helpful.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. So I'm Zach. A few of you guys know me already. I'm 34 years old. I have 3 children. I've lived in Montrose for 30 of those 34 years. And I've heard a few ideas come across the desk about eliminating taxes and things like that and trying to help the younger generation, my generation, because, well, we don't vote. My question is, all the programs that the younger generation uses, the rec facilities, the infrastructure, if you eliminate that sales tax, that income into the city, how do you plan to supplement those? Because my children use them, my friends' children use them. It's not something that's divided by class divide or by age. Where does the funding come from that then?
So for this one, we'll start with Ms. Brunecki. And sorry, before you begin your answer, and just to be fair to, I guess, all the questioners as well as the candidates, if we could refrain from clapping for one person, because we definitely wouldn't want to boo for another person. Just be neutral. Thank you.
And I'm going to try and rephrase this. Where would the funding come if we say we got rid of the food tax? Well, there's so many other things. My thing is that taxation is not the answer, first and foremost. Montrose currently is at 8.530%. Denver is 8.50. Denver's a lot bigger than we are. If you've ever gone to Denver and you buy something and it's food-wise, you put in your zip code. The zip code can go in the city so that the citizens in the city can get their, the discount, or not so much the discount, but the exemption on the food tax and prescription drugs. First and foremost, I don't think our prescriptions are taxed here, but some places it are. But if you input an area code, then you can be in that exempt. Those who are visiting through our tourism can continue to bring in that taxation.
Thank you. And Mr. Bennett, if you could answer that question.
There are more ways to get money than a grocery sales tax, and most places use it. The answer is to sit down and figure out how to do it instead of just taking it at somebody's word that that's the only way to get the revenues. Simple? Well, it's not as simple as it sounds, but that's the way it ought to be done. And we ought to find out how to be equitable to those that make less money, because a grocery sales tax is, by economists' definition, a tax against the poor. And we should learn how to take and cope with that. Half of our people in this town have to have aid to get, our kids have to have aid to get lunch. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Frank?
Full disclosure, that Mr. Frank is my son. Yeah, just so there's no confusion there, that there definitely is a relationship going on there. The question is, how do you replace the income that would be lost if you eliminated the grocery tax? And I think that through the budgeting process, that is something that if that was the will of the voters, that it comes down to a matter of finding those areas in the budget where there is a little bit of flex, tightening up departmental budgets to make sure that we could overcome that obstacle. But this really all comes down to, if it's the will of the people, the city council is going to have to make that happen, however that may be.
Thank you. And next we have Ms. Oswald.
Well, if we're talking about the grocery tax, I can see where there's a benefit in obtaining the funds for the people moving through and utilizing and buying food at the grocery store. But as far as the county itself, the people that live here, I would like to see if there's a way to exempt the citizens from that tax. And that tax is going to fund our police department, so it doesn't go to the rec center and those types of facilities. But I think there are ways that we can look if that's the will of the people. It's difficult to say that we're not overtaxed when we also own a golf course. I mean, there's amenities that I'm not sure that the city should actually have, especially if it means that we're taxing people, particularly when so much of our population is at the lower income level.
Thank you. And Ms. Bynum?
So sales tax makes up the city's revenue. That's where the city gets its money to operate. The city of Montrose does not collect any money from property taxes. So the property taxes you pay do not go to the city. We are the largest city in the state of Colorado that doesn't collect any property tax. And I think that's really important, and it's something I'm going to continue to fight for. If we were to take away the sales tax that we apply to groceries, we'd be taking away the one thing that tourists come to our community to buy. We'd be cutting off our nose to spite our face. It would mean a $4 million loss to the city, and it would have to come with a reduction of services. That is the entire streets division, and the entire parks division isn't even enough to make up that $4 million.
Thank you. Ms. Meek?
Mr. Frank, you looked directly at me several times. So I think you were directing that question at me. Sales tax on food. I think it's immoral to tax food, no matter whether you're rich or poor. I'm not rich. As someone might think that I'm rich, I own a property. I also pay, approximately 30% on my sales, or my property tax on my property. That's for commercial, and I also have a house or apartment complex, but that's residential, and I live in that apartment. So I pay property tax on that. I don't use those services, and I'm not saying that other people shouldn't use those services. They should. We are already paying for the rec district. We're talking about a food tax. It is the city, if the city can manage to borrow money for other projects, gigantic projects out there, and turn around and now tax the citizens for something that they can't manage to pay for, that doesn't make sense to me. I'm not an idiot, but it really doesn't make sense to me. I think that sales tax on food is just wrong, and we should remove it. There's plenty of other taxes that we're already paying that will not go away.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Arbogast.
I kind of generally agree with the Mr. Frank up here. If the citizens want it, it's the council's job to pass it, to change it. That's what we're here for. If it gets more complex in there, of course, because, yeah, you're going to lose some money. You can look at the things, what you can cut on, but are there other ways? I know a lot of people in the city talk constantly about we're a tourist town. We get lots of money from tourists. I think there's a splitting of hairs in there where we think of tourists as people coming from out of state for the outdoor recreation and all that, and they consider people coming down from Junction or passing through. How do you get more money out of the tourists? Maybe, and I have no idea, just throwing it out of the top of my head, maybe the taxes on hotels that they're staying at go up to make up for the difference of losing it, along with tightening some of the government. I don't know. It's all things to be looked into and discussed.
Thank you. And Mr. Ulibarri?
Well, I think what we're going to have to do if we want to eliminate the grocery taxes to tighten our belts. We can't continue to give out free incentives, build hotels, and build miles and miles of walking paths that have to be maintained. Even though I like them, I think they're nice. But we have areas in this community that can use the money. I know that if the citizens want to get rid of grocery tax, all they have to do is do a petition and get it on the ballot. I think right now, because of the indebtedness that we're in, I think it would be a mistake. I think that we would be looking for other income, and let me tell you, there aren't a whole lot of places that you can look for income in a small community like this, especially with the fact that we are going to be losing hundreds of jobs in this community next year. We have currently a virus that's going to be scaring people. I just heard we had a case in Gunnison. So I'd like to say that let's get rid of the grocery tax, but unfortunately, we need it right now to pay our debts.
Thank you. And Mr. Anderson?
I heard him, when he posed his question, just talk about taxes in general. I think that this is how we pay for our quality of life and the things that we enjoy in Montrose, as well as necessities like police protection and the other services that are essential to a community. So if you're going to take away $4 million, then how do we recoup that? And I don't think just tightening our belt is an answer. So people have told us that they want these other things that make life enjoyable here. And if we don't have them, people will either leave or choose not to come here. And so I think it's important to keep our income. And so I'm against any kind of dissolving, unless, like Mr. Ulibarri said, if the citizens all want that to happen, then they get the chance to vote on it and make it happen.
Thank you. And Mr. White?
So in answer to your question, generally I'm in favor of the citizens making that decision. They voted to forego property tax in lieu of putting a tax on everything, except it's gone so far that the franchise fee that the city charges to DMEA, to Black Hills Energy, is now their sales tax applied to that. There's double taxation all over the place. Relative to your question about the rec district, yes, the rec district is getting a portion, that 0.3 cents, and that is on food. The rec district's in a unique position, though, because they have a property tax which can be adjusted. They also charge fees. Those fees can be adjusted to compensate for any loss in revenue somewhere else. The city itself, there was this proposition, this Measure 2A, the police public safety sales tax, which passed. That tax equates to roughly what the food tax would be. These are all things that have to be worked out, and again, citizen-driven. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final answer for that question is from Mr. Stockton.
The best for last. There's been a lot of talk about going voter approval, and I agree with that too. If it comes up on the ballot and the voters decide that's the path they want to take, so be it. But sales tax on groceries is not something new, as people would suggest. It's been around since the day the city imposed a sales tax, period, same as the county. There have been some tax increases through property tax by the fire district, library district, school district, things of that sort. But the city has not asked for a tax increase since 1986. It's 35 years ago, and that was for public safety. So if we were to reduce or eliminate the tax on food, we're looking at a 21% cut in our budget. Can you afford that in your personal budget? I don't think so. And how can you ask the city to take a 21% and maintain what we have today? Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Ken and Brenda Williams. If you could find the microphone, if the microphone could find you. Okay, I guess you had both written here. Is this the one about the conversation? Okay, great. So this next question, which we will start with Mr. Bennett for the answer, and once again, 1-minute answers, and he is holding the red sign, and I think because we do have such a tight night, I might just have to interrupt you more and be more aggressive about that. Not that it happened a lot, but we have to be aggressive. So the next question, what, if anything, could the City Council have done to facilitate a conversation between the neighbors of Tortilla Flats and GMCO, is that correct, GMCO? People who know, about the mag chloride facility before it came to this point, starting with Mr. Bennett. And if you need me to read that again, I can.
Well, I don't know how that thing came about. All of a sudden, it started to appear. So I don't know who told them to go ahead. It would seem to me they would have had to have had a building permit. But I would have gone down there and held a community meeting with them and stood there and took their grief or their questions and then brought them back, found the answers, and then taken them back to them. If that's the only place in the world that chemical dump could have been put, well, that's fine, but I think there's plenty of room out in the middle of the airport to stick it between the runways, and then it couldn't hurt anybody. You know, it's about the same thing as the police station. There's not going to be any parking space around there, and we're all going to take and not be able to use downtown because the kiddies from the college are all parked there. We're not asking people. People have the answers. We're just going along in a tunnel and believe we got all the answers on this city council. That's it.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Frank, if you could answer that.
I think that the city could have expedited a lot more conversations when it first came up, but it was unfortunately presented to the city as sort of a done deal. And because it isn't city property and it doesn't require any kind of input for permits, that made it very difficult. But it should have been a neighborly thing to do to facilitate that conversation happening a lot sooner.
Thank you. Ms. Oswald?
Well, I wasn't privy to how all that came about, but I did talk to some of the people that felt like they didn't get enough of a heads up. They don't understand, and they weren't sure what was going to be done to make them feel safe. I'm wondering if there isn't a way that we can regulate that in some way by by our streets that are accessed there. If there's a way to put some pressure on how it's utilized and how it's what kind of barrier we can put around that to make the people feel more safe.
Thank you. And the next answer from Ms. Bynum.
I share their frustration. That was super frustrating to watch dirt move around and not be able to get any answers from the railroad company. They've been completely unresponsive, and that's very frustrating. We have reached out to them, and I think we're making some inroads, which is good news. But I do think that we as a city could be more proactive when we see dirt being moved around, even though it didn't need a building permit, even though it didn't need a change of zoning, even though it's private property. I think we could be more proactive in being your voice, in finding out what's going on, and then communicating that to our constituents. Absolutely.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Meek.
I would agree with Ms. Bynum on being proactive, but Tortilla Flats has suffered neglect. How long? How long? And what does it take? Finally, a few people, a large number of people running for city council who say there's something wrong here. Suddenly there's a mag chloride storage facility. It went up pretty quickly, and tankers out there. It's been going on for a long time, and various city councils have just ignored that neighborhood. Why? Why do we keep ignoring 20%, at least 20% of our population, whether they all live in Tortilla Flats or not? The Hispanic community in Montrose is 20 to 25% of our population. Why do we keep ignoring them? It needs to stop.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Arbogast.
Yeah, from what I've been told, it was a last-minute thing. It's out of the city's hands, no permits needed, not their land. The railroad didn't communicate. I understand the railroad has a history across the nation of doing things like this. However, if anybody in city government had any inkling months ago that this was coming, they needed to go to the people then. If that's the case, yeah, then they did the wrong thing. I don't know. There's lots of things that speculate around the town, but it's definitely time to find out. Did anybody know, and did they not say anything back then?
Thank you. Mr. Ulibarri, you're next.
Well, I was a resident of Tortilla Flats for many, many years. I guess to see it the way it is and the participation that area has received from the city is kind of sad. No sidewalks and just falling apart. But like everybody up here said, the fact is that the railroad is private property and there was really no say-so by the city. But recently I've had conversations with the assistant manager and the new community communications director or whatever about the area. I've had meetings with them, and as a matter of fact, I'm hoping that tomorrow when we have a meeting down there at the MATA that they'll show up. And you know, one thing that has happened that hasn't happened is that years ago, Montrose, the city, had a representative on the board.
And I'm going to have to cut you off. I'm sorry about that. And so next, Mr. Anderson.
So I share the frustration everyone has experienced, and it just doesn't sound right to make excuses for the city, but it's just unfortunate, and everyone's kind of characterized that already. What I'd like to do, and if I'm continue to be on city council, what I'm going to recommend is that we look at our building codes and our permit codes and try to extend that somehow so that something like this would require a permit to be taken out, so then the city knows before any construction begins. And at the same time, I don't want to encumber all of our other builders who follow the rules and already do the right thing. So I would be looking for some way to prevent this in the future from catching us off guard.
Thank you. Next, Mr. White.
Well, again, this usually starts at city staff level. Almost a year ago, a rebuild of North 9th Street was taking place. They milled a road, they did infrastructure repairs, and that's always an early indicator that maybe something is going to go on. When they started clearing the lot, I made a phone call to a friend of mine that has a business on North 9th, and I said, what's going on across the street? Oh, it's a mag chloride storage facility. I said, you're kidding. I called downtown, I talked to the planning department. Oh yeah, I've heard about that. Well, that's as far as it went. And so to me, it's a travesty. I mean, years ago, I see former council member in the audience here, there was a gateway corridors plan where there was discussion about beautification of the entrance to the city. You know, the railroad doesn't play by these rules. I'm not sure that the city council necessarily could have done anything. It comes down to, did the staff know, did the staff advise city council, and what was the communication there? But, to have this industrial facility right at the entrance to our community is not a good thing, and it's a disservice to the residents.
Next, Mr. Stockton.
I worked for AT&T for 34 years, and the last assignment I had was outside plant, which is protection of our buried facilities. And a lot of our fiber optics went through the right-of-ways along the railroad, and it's a tough group to deal with, and they were not very cooperative when we needed to get access to that, so they're very secretive in the way they work. So I put the onus on the railroad for not sharing their plans with that property. And as everyone else says, it is an eyesore, and I think it's a shame that facility went up with all the efforts the city's doing to revitalize the Northwest Montrose. But I think there's hope in the future. Mayor Bowman has assured the community that they're going to have this on the work session for this coming Tuesday to prevent anything like this from happening again. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Ms. Brunecki.
I'm just a tad bit confused that no one in town knew that any of this was happening. First of all, if you own property in the city of Montrose, even if you want to build a doghouse or an addition, you have to get a building permit. So someone had to know something. And it is an eyesore. We drove past there yesterday, drove down to Tortilla Flats to see that really in the past 30 some years, almost 40 years that my husband and I have been married, it hasn't changed since he was in high school. So this is just, to me, those citizens that live in that area, this is just another kick in their face that hopefully we can do something as a community for them.
Thank you. And that's the end of the answers for that question. The next question, I believe, is by Jim, and I don't want to butcher your last name, starts with an H. It's not Jim Anderson, it's Jim H. Would you like to give that question? And we have a microphone somewhere.
Well, thank you very much for all throwing your hat in the ring. There's a lot of questions I have for you, but I think the one that is probably would be the most disturbing is that there's been a lot of really nasty comment online about city manager, about city council. And there's an underlying feeling that this election is a referendum on the city manager, and that if things turn out a certain way, the city manager is going to get fired. And I would like to know your opinion on how the city manager, Bill Bell, is doing, how he relates to council, and is there anything other than that you might do to work with the city manager?
And we'll start this answer with Mr. Frank.
Thank you, Mr. Hogsness. See, you as a quick answer, that right now I've been observing Bill Bell for the last year and a half, and I would honestly say I think he's a very, very intelligent man. He's got a lot of training in a lot of areas, and that I really feel like right now he's an asset to the city. I think one of the miscommunications is that the impression that he runs the city council. After having sat in meetings for quite a while, I have never seen him try to run city council, but he is not afraid of presenting the impression that the staff has given him, and I would be happy to work with him for the next 4 years.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Oswald.
I too have no problem with Mr. Bell. I worked with him some when I was in the leadership program. I think he's very intelligent and very creative. I think at worst maybe he's a little too optimistic on how fast the community can grow. That's really my only concern, is that we're too optimistic in what we can do. But I too believe that he's been a real asset to the city.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Bynum.
I would agree that Bill Bell has been an asset to the city. He has a good vision for what our city can be. He works well with council. He takes direction from council. The 5 councilors are his direct supervisors and do a semi-annual review for Mr. Bell. He is a former president of the Colorado City and County Association, Managers Association, and the Colorado Municipal League. He is highly, highly respected and regarded across our state, and I think we're really lucky to have him. I've said that before, and I'll say it again.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Meek.
Wow. Well, I've dealt directly with Mr. Bell as well. I served on the DDA board 2 times and had some head-on collisions with his direction, primarily because he likes to spend taxpayer money. And he likes to spend taxpayer money on friends and associates projects. The deals are done without citizen knowledge. We can look back at the proximity space, which was given $150,000 to with city investment. There's also a few other projects downtown that he seems to be able to give money to. Personally, I never asked for money for my business. I never will, never would. But it's disturbing to me that he doesn't. There's so many organizations that taxpayers and citizens had an opportunity to voice their disagreement or opinions of, and they're all gone. Where's MAMA? Where's the Chamber of Commerce? Where's the DDA? Rotary now has 2 divisions in Rotary. One is run by Mr. Bell, or he's also a member of that group. I just want people to start asking questions and dig deeper.
Thank you. Mr. Arbogast.
Yeah, I've been coming to the work meetings and to the city council meetings and watching, especially in the work meetings. I've heard these things that you talk about. I've read them in the paper. I have not personally seen any of it. Seems like city council does what they do. They take advice from the department heads. Bill Bell is an administrative position in charge of keeping all the rest of it running. Certainly if I was on city council, that sort of thing, if it were to happen, would never be let happen. But I have seen actually no real evidence of it as of yet.
Thank you. Mr. Ulibarri?
Well, as a builder and a remodeler, I work with a lot of different people. And at this time, I've had a few conversations with Bill. I believe that I could work with him. And I believe that the responsibility of the city council is to manage the manager, and it's not to micromanage the manager. So.
Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. I have great respect for Mr. Bell. He's an incredible leader, and he's demonstrated that across the state and in other states as well. And I really take objection to some comment about him doing special things for friends. Every dollar that gets spent is approved by City Council, and he takes direction from City Council. We set the budget, he follows it, and has never done any of the things that I hear in some of the papers that he's accused of. So I think we are extremely lucky to have him. He's the envy of our state. There are many cities that would take him away from us in a heartbeat if they could pry him loose. But he loves Montrose as much as the rest of us. And so I think he's a great asset to us.
Thanks. Next, Mr. White.
Okay, I'll go in reverse. So as far as your question, scuttlebutt that the city manager is going to be terminated. Number one, it takes 3 council members to terminate the city manager, so any one person can't do that. And obviously, he's an employee at will, so if the majority found some egregious thing that he had done, then obviously that's their decision. How he relates to city council, I only know what I see. And what I hear from council members. Apparently they have a very good relationship. I have talked to Mr. Bell, and echoing other comments, he is a very intelligent person. He is well-read, well-schooled. I would say that my opinion, which was your first question, is that he's inculcated in government. He doesn't see the way that the private sector does. I, as a business person and a taxpayer, we are on 2 different planes. I'll end it there. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Stockton.
Well, I've been here 5 years, and I don't see any of the nefarious acts that the rumor mill has out there about Mr. Bell or anybody else on staff or council. As I indicated earlier, I've been attending these meetings for 2 years now. I see that Mr. Bell and staff work very well with council. He's asked the community to get involved with budget. Everyone's invited to the budget meetings to actually even create the budget. I think he's an open person. I've had one-on-one conversations with him in these chambers, in his office, through email. He's very responsive to the community. I think he understands the community. He's local. I believe he was born in Delta, raised in this area. So he knows what's going on, and he has the interests of Montrose at heart.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Bernecki.
I don't personally have a problem with Bill Bell. I think some of his practices of what he's done with some of the staff members that worked for the city is a little questionable. Whether it's that he has, which I was told by someone else, where he has a a ledger in there and says, well, look, if we eliminate these and these and these, we can do this and this and this, which is really good. You know, as a leader, I understand that employees are the highest cost to anyone. But really, at what cost do we do when we're worried about our kids eating, our geriatric population eating, but yet it's okay to get rid of, you know, staff and just have 24-hour or less part-time employees seasonal so that they don't have to pay any benefits for and they can work for minimum wage. I think that sets two different tones.
Thank you. And the final answer, Mr. Bennett.
Yeah, I think the man goes a little too fast at the things that he tries to do with the city. And he has a whole together different idea what the city ought to be doing than most of its people. He puts subordinates out in front so they can take the heat. I don't appreciate that. I've been a leader my whole life. And when I make a decision, I'll stand by it and I'll stand up for it and I'll take the heat for it. I don't like that. He's a little too expensive. He's about twice what the average person for a 20,000 population city gets. And we can't find out what he really gets because the city is not transparent. I'm sure he has got a tremendous influence over that. We've been asking for information on his wages and benefits, and we keep getting this thing that we can't be told. I mean, we just don't get anything. And he has something out there that manages to keep the employees awful quiet because I can't get anything out of any of them. And that's it.
Thank you. Next, our question is another spoken one from the audience, and our speaker is Anna Mamie.
My question has already been asked.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next question is by Kathy Johnson, and I have her question here. And with this one, we will begin with Ms. Oswald. Very good. Have you been attending council meetings so you know the full extent of the job?
Have I been attending council meetings, and what's the rest of the question?
So you know the full extent of the job.
I've been attending and watching recently. I've read the budget. I've read the charter. I've been talking to the citizens, the business owners, and yes, I think I do have a good grasp of what this job is all about. It's not an easy job. I can see where it takes a lot of time, and I truly do commend the people that sit on this council. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Ms. Bynum.
This is an easy one when you're already on city council. Yes, I've been attending city council meetings and also work sessions, which honestly are probably even more important than the council meetings, which is one of the reasons we've recently decided that those Monday work sessions, which are usually 2 hours long, should be televised and available for you all to watch anytime you want to see what we're up to. Those are the times we don't vote, but we discuss a lot of ideas and put them on the agenda for upcoming city council meetings. In addition to attending city council meetings, every city councilor sits on numerous other committees and assignments around town and even out of town. I was elected by mayors across the state of Colorado to represent medium-sized and rural cities on the Colorado Municipal League Board. So I go to Denver for that about 8 times a year. So a lot of meetings, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Meek.
I have attended city council meetings in the past. I've had a business downtown since 2014, and so I have periodically attended city council meetings and work sessions. More recently, I've attended more as well, so I could understand exactly what is going on. I do a lot of reading. I do read all of the city council agendas and minutes, and I do attend other board meetings as well. The Murrah Board, any of the other board meetings, planning meeting, historic, I have attended those as well.
Thank you. Mr. Arbogast?
The question was attending city council meetings? Yes. City work meetings? Yes. Make it nice and easy.
Thank you. Mr. Ulibarri?
No. I haven't been attending city council meetings, but with 10 years on the city council, I have a knowledge of and experiences of what happens. I've also been council representative to a lot of community boards, and I know exactly what I'm trying to get on the council for.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
That's kind of an easy one. People elected me to attend these meetings, and so I have done that faithfully. I think I've phoned in once in the last 4 years and attended every other meeting, including all the work sessions. The boards that I'm part of, I go to all those meetings, and my favorite thing of all is attending the youth council city meetings. They're a terrific group of kids, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of that.
Thank you. Mr. White?
Yes, I have attended city council meetings as a counselor from 2008 to 2004 to 2008. Didn't miss but 1 or 2 meetings during that time. Fully understand the extent of the job, the knowledge that comes with it. I have kept myself abreast all of these years. I get the city's emails. I know what the planning commission is doing. All of you should be on that list. You're here because you're civically minded. So all this information is available online. They will email you the packets for the work session, for the council meeting, for the planning commission, the urban renewal authority board meetings. You have to be an informed citizen. I'm an informed citizen. I stay informed. I have the institutional knowledge of those 4 years. So that's a long way to say I'm ready.
Thank you. Mr. Stockton?
Well, I think you heard in my opening remarks that I've been attending all the meetings over the last 2 years, council, work sessions. I've started doing the Mura meetings. I have attended the budget meeting this past October. But it's more than just attending meetings. This is 30 to 40 hour a week job. So the question is, do you really have the time and the commitment to put in that kind of effort? I'm a retired guy, play golf a little bit, but I commit to you that I will put in the desired amount of time and the effort to get this job done properly.
Thank you. And next, Ms. Bernecki.
I can say I have not attended a meeting, but I have watched it on the TV channel on YouTube. I have read the city charter. I have read all of the minutes and stuff that is posted on the internet. So yes, I know exactly what I'm getting myself into. My husband thinks I'm crazy for doing it, and committing myself and my family to support the city of Montrose for the next 4 years. But I am committed to it. Once I start something, I like to finish it out and see it through. And yes, I do know what I'm getting myself into, and I do understand what it constitutes.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett?
I understand what's involved in being a director on a board. I completely understand it. I've been to a few of the work sessions and a few of the council meetings, and I got to admit it's been few. The one that upset me a little bit the last time I came was the work session was all around that table. They obviously were making a recording of it so they could put it on the TV. I couldn't hear a word they said because it wasn't on the PA system here. So that was a little bit disgruntling, but I watched it on TV, so I know what was going on. I can put in the job, I can put in the time, I can put in the work, and I know what I'm doing, so I can do a good job for the whole population of Montrose. Thank you.
Thank you. Final answer with Mr. Frank.
Yes, I attend council meetings, I attend the work session meetings, I attend the Mura meetings, I attend the DART meetings. I'll attend nearly any meeting that I'm aware of. But further, as other people have mentioned, that it's more than just attending the meetings. I also read the entire packet. I read all of the wonderfully exciting legal documents. Yeah, if you want to have a problem going to sleep, there's your cure right there. I am very aware of what it takes to do this job and do it well.
Thank you very much. So I forgot to mention earlier that we need to end by 8 on the dot and not go over. So unfortunately, we're to our last question probably before our closing statements. And Mr. Anderson has given me 2 questions. Do you have a preference on which one that I ask? You're the next. The Russell Stovers, okay. So we, depending on how these answers go, we probably won't have another question, but we'll see. And if not, we'll try and get those answered for people later. So this question, which will begin this time with Ms. Bynum, is the termination of the Russell Stover building is a topic of public interest. Do you have any concerns with any potential environmental, ground site, and material condition associated with a 50-year-old building? And if elected, how would you protect the taxpayers of Montrose now and in the future against any potential cleanup cost, if applicable?
Thank you very much for that question. I'll first start with what I'm a little more concerned about, and that's the people who are going to be losing their jobs. And I'm really proud that the city got together immediately and had meetings with the State Department of Labor, Montrose Economic Development Corporation, and started talking immediately about what we as a community could do to support their reentry into new jobs once Russell Stover closed. As far as the building is concerned, the city owns the land, but Russell Stover owns the building. And if I'm reelected, I have no intention of taking that building on as the city's burden. It's Russell Stover's building to sell, and if they're not able to, I believe the legal contract, which when you read all that legalese, it's a contract from 1973, but it makes it their responsibility to remove that building.
Thank you. Ms. Meek?
I would agree with Ms. Bynum on that issue. It is the property of Russell Stovers, and they should be taking care of it, whether that is to mitigate asbestos or any other problems that might be in there. We own a 100-year-old plus building, and we face those same issues. So it can be very, very, very costly, and the taxpayers don't need to be responsible for that.
Thank you. Mr. Arbogast?
Yeah, I'm kind of going to duplicate what they said. The city should never take on that building, no matter what. It's the responsibility of Russell Stovers, whether they sell it or they have to demolish it cleanly. It's on them.
Thank you. Mr. Ulibarri?
The building belongs to Russell Stovers. It's their responsibility to mitigate all the environmental impacts on that. I do have a few concerns that when they do that and they do leave, we're going to be having the water problem. They use a big share of water, and when they discontinue water, then who pays for the water that they're not going to use? The residents. And there's some other issues, but no, I think it should be their responsibility to take care of the building.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that they have full responsibility. And the contract, I read it too, says that they are responsible for leaving the land like they got it in the first place. So the city could force them to scrape it clean, but I'm not sure that that's our best solution. So we have to wait and see what they want to do and what their alternatives are and play that out. So a number of organizations in the community are all involved, and so I think working with all of these is the right approach.
Thank you. Mr. White?
All right, thank you. Again, some institutional knowledge. I've known folks that have worked in the plant side of it. Yes, the building has problems, lead paint, asbestos. 18, 20 years ago, the fuel oil tanks that power the boilers, the lines running underground sprung a leak. Basically, they rusted out. So there is environmental contamination on city-owned land. I mean, ultimately, the city does own the 29 acres that the plant sits on. The city has an asset in those 29 acres. Perhaps Russell Stovers is willing to buy the land, sell the plant as a package with the land. That would help defray some of the spending that's going on. and use it for other important things. I could go on, but I know more than we have time for. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Stockton?
The onus is on Russell Stovers for the cleanup, or a purchaser of that building would be responsible for it. If a purchaser came in and wanted incentives from the city to clean it up, I would say no incentives to bring somebody in if the cleanup were asked for. Thank you.
Ms. Brunecki?
I have to agree with Barbara Bynum. I feel the same way. I do think that Russell Stovers is responsible for that building, and they should be responsible for any of the cleanup and hazardous material that would constitute. The citizens of Montrose should not have to be responsible for that. What we are responsible for are the 400-plus people that will be out of a job.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett?
I think Russell Stover has been a great tenant, and they've probably done some things in that building that they did it before the law was passed that requires remediation. We have to make sure that they do remediate everything that's in the building that's of hazardous waste. We also have to make sure that they take care of the surface of the land and underneath it for those fuel tanks and whatever other chemical tanks they've had, and clean that up too, because as we all know, if that's contaminated, you got to haul the dirt off and then you got to replace it. And that's an extraordinarily expensive proposition. We should know what they're doing all the time. It should not be a saleable property until it is clean. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Frank?
Well, as everyone else has stated, it's at this point, the most desirable outcome would be for us to help facilitate the sale of the building and the business to some other person. Right now, the city does have the fast response team that's dedicated to this, partnered with Colorado Workforce, MEDC, and a number of others. I serve on that committee as a representative of the Montrose Community Foundation. When it comes to actually, if we get to the point where they have to vacate and destruct the building, at that point, I do agree with everyone else here. It is not the city's responsibility. The one thing that we can do is to ensure there is proper oversight on the destruction to make sure they are following all the relevant federal and state laws for the mitigation of lead, oil, and asbestos.
Thank you. And final answer, Ms. Oswald?
Well, I too am more concerned about the jobs that we're losing, and I also know that Russell Stover is the second largest customer for DMEA, so the city has a lot to adjust to, but I also believe that it is the obligation of Russell Stover to fulfill their contract, and they would be responsible for any mitigation that needed to be done.
Great, thank you. So now, we wouldn't have enough time to answer the other questions, so we will go to closing statements. And the closing statement, you have 1.5 minutes, and this time we will actually start at this end with Mr. Ulibarri.
Well, I'm not a great public speaker, but I can tell you that I'm real passionate about Montrose. This is my home. I was born and raised here, and I'll do anything that it takes to make Montrose a good place to live. I believe that there are some issues that the futures, when Russell Stover leaves, we're going to see a decline in revenues. We're going to see a decline in electrical use because they are one of the largest electrical users. We're going to see a decline in city water, and we're going to have a bunch of people out of work that the city is going to have to, or the county's going to have to help, either with some kind of social programs or welfare programs. I believe that for the last few years, I think we've been spending a lot of money making investments that are speculative. That property down there by the river has been there for a while, and several developers have tried to develop it to no end. And I think that what we need to do is, if the community is serious about taxes, is to look at where our money's going and be a little more conservative. Thank you, and vote for Ed Ulibarri.
Thank you very much. Mr. Arbogast.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for coming out. Of course, it's great to come and get answers to some of your questions. There are very few questions because of the time limits. Feel free, I have a card out there, a Facebook page, you can ask me there. Ask me, get my phone number if you want to talk, sit down and go over stuff in more detail than what you can get in this little bit, because a lot of it is kind of the same answers over and over and over, a lot of repetition. I want to make Montrose better. I want to make financially sound local economy that wants people to come here with government that is very much more responsible with the people's money than what they have been. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Meek.
Taxation is the great equalizer. We're all the same when it comes to taxation. We all have to pay taxes. And I'm disturbed that we pay, our property taxes are high, our sales taxes are high, and everyone's struggling in our community. And I think we do have a high poverty level. I'm not wealthy, and so if someone were to misconstrue that as if I'm rich and I don't get it, I get it. I struggle to pay bills like everyone else. I have to pay taxes like everyone else, and we are a one-income family. And I watch my kids. I have a 25-year-old, a 23-year-old, and a 21-year-old, and they're going to come back into this community, and they do live in this community, and they can't afford to buy houses. The American dream, to buy a house. I don't know how we navigate around those things. I personally can't afford to buy a house right now, you know, to actually own my own house and not live in an apartment. But those things concern me. Our housing prices are really high, and how are our kids going to manage when the weight of taxation is just growing on them every year? I don't know. I hope you'll vote for me.
Thank you. Barbara Bynum.
Thanks for coming out tonight. I love talking about these issues. I think it's so important to have engaged citizens. I invite all of you to come to a future work session or a budget meeting or a comprehensive plan meeting. There's lots of opportunities where you don't just get to watch, but you get to participate. So I invite you to get on board with some of those. I'll leave you by just saying I think that I have a strong track record of looking out for this community and listening to the people to deliver things that make our community a great place to live, to work, to retire. One of the things I'm most proud about is that when we were about to open the brand new rec center at the end of 2016, we could see that because the project was on budget and on time, and so many people had already signed up for annual passes, we were able to lower the mills on your property taxes that would go into effect in 2017. So I do think I'm financially responsible and accountable to the people. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. And if you ever have any questions about what's going on with the city, or you want to talk about something or let me know how you feel, please reach out. I know all of us are available. We all have materials. We have websites. We have Facebook pages. We have phone numbers. Give us a call. I'd love to sit down over a cup of coffee and hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Thanks. Charlie Oswald.
We are so fortunate to live in such a beautiful place with so many caring and generous people. There's a lot of challenges, but we also have a lot of talent and resources. Our problems are unique to us, and we need to find our own solutions and not take cues from outside sources. As a member of the Montrose City Council, I will represent my constituents in a well-informed and independent manner. I'm not running because I have all the answers. I'm running because I'm eager to work with the community to find them. Having lived most of my life across the Front Range, I watched a lot of small towns turn into big cities. I've experienced the good and bad of different government entities, and I feel I can bring that experience to this job. Changing priorities doesn't mean giving up all the great ideas. It just means putting them in different order. I think because of my involvement, I was encouraged to run for this position. I'm very proud of that, and I will work hard to maintain that support. As we grow, let's work together. Let's be inclusive, keep an open dialogue, help everyone, and really show the rest of the state what quality of life means. I have the time, energy, and motivation to do this job and would ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And those were the at-large candidates, and now the District 4 candidates.
The first thing that I would like to do is salute the people that are sitting up here at this podium right now. I don't believe it's the citizens' right to participate in government. I think it's a citizen's responsibility to participate in government. I think that as a local citizen, as somebody who's grown up here, our family business is here, my family lives here, my grandchildren live here, I am more than deeply invested in making sure that Montrose is a safe, profitable, and pleasant place to live. And I really look forward to having you all support me in this upcoming election. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Now, Mr. Bennett.
In Montrose, we need transparency. We don't have that. We need a publicly published check register. We don't have that. The county does. We need a less spendthrift council. We need less taxes. We need prudent management that can do far better if we don't pay for every idea that comes down the path. When you elect me, I'll do my best effort to bring Montrose into solvency and keep it that way. I will thank you for your vote.
Thank you. And Ms. Mary Brunecki?
I want to thank you all for coming out here and listening to us, and I want to thank all of you guys again for your wonderful insight on everything. My husband and I have been married almost 40 years, but I'm not that old. But we feel like this is our city as much as you feel like it's your city. We all have become accustomed to a quality of life that every single one of us deserve, from those that live in Solar Hills to those that live in Tortilla Flats. Are there problems? Yes, there are problems. Otherwise, you wouldn't have 11 people sitting up here. So a vote for me is a vote for you, because I'm going to advocate for you, and I will give you 100%. Thank you.
David Stockton.
Paul Harvey used to close with, "Now the rest of the story." So back to Colleen's question as to why anyone would want to run for city council. I told her it boils down to personal motivation, that each of us will have a different driving force. For me, it's a simple desire to continue to serve the community I live in. I've been serving communities I've lived in over the last 25 years in small but beneficial ways. Things like Boys Club membership, Habitat for Humanity housing, church outreach programs, and simple things like doing chores for my neighbors. 46 years ago, I swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States as a member of the Air Force. With your help in April, I'm prepared to swear that oath again, along with a promise to support the state constitution and the rules governing our city. Your charter, I take my commitment seriously. In addition to upholding my oath, I make the following commitment to you: to always be thoughtful on any issue that comes before council, to weigh the pros and cons and make the best decision possible based on the facts available. I will ensure your tax dollars are spent in a manner that meets the needs of all Montrosians, current and future. And finally, the keynote of my campaign, and more importantly to me as a person, is to always act with a strong set of principles. Those principles include integrity, honesty, and a sense of fairness for all. Thank you.
Thank you. And now our District 3 candidates. David White first.
Thank you. There you go. Thank you, Roy. Thank you all for being here. You know, we're all sitting here because we love this community, we love the city that we live in. That plaque up there says it all. In 2013, this city became an all-American city, and it still is. We come from different places, we see things differently, whether it's politically, whether it's structurally, culturally, spiritually, but we're all in this together. Your vote for me or Mr. Anderson or any of the other candidates here is going to be driven not just by what you hear tonight, but by what your belief system is. I'm running for city council. Mr. Anderson, he and I have talked about this. You know, he was going to run unopposed. We disagree on a few things, and so this brings a dialogue to the table. But ultimately, it's a philosophical difference. In 2005, Matt Miles, who's a developer here in town, stood before the city council and said, "You can't eat the scenery." And he went out and he built Oxbow Shopping Center, he built River Landing, he built subdivisions. He didn't do it with government incentives. He did it with his own thoughts, process, capital. And that's where things have changed. And so, again, the philosophical difference, we can have all of these things, but it has to be homegrown. That's where I'm coming from. Where did your taxpayer money go? Where is the accountability? We need that back. Thank you very much. I appreciate your vote. David White, District 3.
Thank you. And Roy Anderson.
Well, thank you. I echo the thanks of all the people up here for you all coming and participating in our local government. If you share an optimistic view for our future, then I would ask you to vote for me. I will listen to citizen input and continue moving Montrose forward. I invite you to continue to provide input to me and to the rest of your city council by phone, email, coming to meetings. There's just lots of avenues that you can reach us. And one of the things I hope to see is that we begin to conduct a regular town meeting that doesn't have an agenda, where people can simply come and discuss topics of interest with department heads and your city council. I recognize that we live in a competitive environment and that we've already shown how competitive Montrose can be. So I would ask you to think about your community's future and vote for me as your councilman from District 3. I would be very honored to serve you in this role. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Super. The League of... Thank you. The League of Women Voters of Montrose County would like to thank all the candidates for coming out tonight and being here. And we commend you for your efforts to serve the people and to go to a position where you can serve the people even more. We also thank our audience for coming out to learn about the candidates and take time out of your schedules to understand the election better. The League of Women Voters, we're all volunteers here in Montrose County, and we also serve Delta County and parts of Ouray County. Well, not parts of, we serve Ouray County. I'm a Ouray County person, but we don't necessarily do forums there, but we may in the future. So we need more volunteers all the time. If you are interested in elections, get involved with the League of Women Voters, because you'll learn a lot, and you'll be with other people who care about how our community is governed. And we take men, yeah, that's important. We're called the League of Women Voters because that was the original name, but we take men. So let's see, don't forget to cast your vote. Again, your ballot will be arriving via mail, and that's being mailed out March 16th, and they must be back to the city by April 7th by 7 p.m. Questions concerning registration and ballot mailing may be directed to the City of Montrose City Clerk's Office. Her phone number is 240-1422. Thank you very much for attending this evening. Have a safe drive home.